My name's Kate. I'm 26 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I was a pretty ordinary woman, maybe even below average if you asked my family. I wasn't the star athlete in school, I wasn't the straight-A student, and I wasn't the one my parents bragged about to their friends. That role belonged to my older brother, Ryan. Ryan's 3 years older than me, and from the moment he was born, he was the golden child, captain of the football team in high school, graduated near the top of his class, landed a cushy corporate job right out of college. My parents still talk about the day he bought his first car, like it was some heroic achievement. And me? Well, I was Kate, the one who tried. That's how my mom always phrased it. When her friends would ask what I was doing, she'd tilt her head with that sympathetic smile and say, "Oh, Kate's trying out a few things." Translation, I hadn't figured my life out yet. And honestly, for a while, they weren't wrong. I bounced between jobs, barista, receptionist, tutoring little kids after school. I wanted to find something that lit me up inside, but nothing stuck. Every time I thought I'd found my path, someone in the family would roll their eyes or mutter, "Here we go again." It got to the point where I almost started believing I wasn't built for anything real. But here's the thing no one in my family ever really noticed about me. I might not have been the loudest, the strongest, or the most impressive, but I was stubborn. I don't mean the kind of stubborn where you argue over who left the milk out. I mean the kind where once I set my mind on something, I couldn't let it go, even if it broke me, even if it made no sense to anyone else. That grit was invisible to my family, but it was there, simmering under the surface. I grew up in a small, quiet town where people rarely left. Most of the kids I knew ended up marrying their high school sweethearts, working at the same factory as their parents, and living 3 streets away from where they were born. There's nothing wrong with that life, but I always felt like I was suffocating in it. I wanted more. I didn't know what more was, but I could feel it pressing against my ribs, demanding I break out. The problem was, I didn't exactly look like someone destined for more. I was a little on the shorter side, not particularly muscular, not particularly tough-looking. I wasn't the kind of girl people imagined in uniform, honestly. I wasn't the kind of girl people imagined doing anything remarkable. That's why the military, boot camp specifically, felt like such a radical choice. Most people assumed it was impulsive, some reckless whim, but the truth? It had been eating at me for years. I'd watch those documentaries about soldiers transforming in boot camp, about people discovering strength they never knew they had, and I'd feel this ache in my chest, a voice whispering, "That could be you, if you're brave enough." But then I'd hear Ryan's laughter in the back of my head, or my dad's disappointed sigh, or my mom's careful, measured, "Do you think that's realistic for you, honey?" So I'd stuff the dream back down and go make another latte for a customer who'd never remember my name. Until the day I couldn't anymore. I still remember sitting alone in my tiny apartment, scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled across the application form. My hands shook as I filled it out, like my body knew before my brain did that this was a turning point. I didn't even tell anyone I'd applied until I got the acceptance letter in the mail. That's the letter I carried home that night, the one that made Ryan laugh so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. It's ironic, isn't it? My family thought I'd joined out of desperation, like it was my last chance to prove myself, but the truth was, I joined because deep down, I believed I had something inside me worth proving. I just had no idea how much it would cost to drag that part of myself out. And honestly, I don't think my family ever believed I'd really go. They thought it was another Kate experiment, one more thing I'd try and fail at. That's why their reaction that night cut so deep. It wasn't just doubt. It was dismissal. And sometimes, dismissal hurts worse than outright cruelty. Because cruelty acknowledges you exist. Dismissal? That makes you invisible. And I refuse to be invisible any longer. You'd think after announcing something as life-changing as joining boot camp, my family would have at least pretended to support me. But instead, the days leading up to my departure turned into one long, slow roast at my expense. Ryan made it his personal mission to remind me every single day how ridiculous he thought I was being. One morning, I was jogging laps around the neighborhood, my pathetic attempt at preparing myself, when he leaned against his shiny car, sipping coffee, waiting for me to pass. As I struggled by, sweaty and gasping, He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted. Better slow down, Colonel Kate. Don't want to pull a muscle before day one. He laughed so hard he actually spilled his coffee. That became his new nickname for me, Colonel Kate. Every time I walked into the room, he'd salute dramatically and smirk. It wasn't affectionate teasing, it was dripping with mockery. He didn't believe I'd even make it past orientation. Dad wasn't much better. His silence said everything. He didn't argue. He didn't tease. He just didn't acknowledge it at all. He'd ask Ryan about his meetings, his promotions, his bonuses. He'd ask Mom about her garden, about the neighbors, about anything. But when it came to me, the air grew heavy with the weight of all the words he wasn't saying. I'd sit there at the dinner table, stabbing at my food, waiting for him to ask me something, anything, even a "So, Kate, when do you leave?" But it never came. Mom, she tried. I'll give her that. She'd hover by my doorway sometimes, watching me do push-ups on the floor, and murmur, "Don't push yourself too hard, honey." Or she'd suggest I pack an extra sweater, like I was going off to summer camp. Her support was always soft, always wrapped in concern, never in confidence. And though I appreciated the care, it also stung, because it meant she didn't actually believe in me, she just didn't want me to get too hurt when I failed. The tension at home made every day feel like a countdown clock ticking in my ear. Outside of family, I didn't have many people cheering me on either. My friends from high school thought I'd lost my mind. "Bootcamp? You?" They'd laugh. "Almost identical to Ryan. You hate mud. Kate, you cry when you get blisters." I can't blame them. I had been the girl who cried over splinters, who quit soccer because the coach yelled too much, but it still hurt to hear them say it. The only one who didn't laugh was Emily, my childhood best friend. I'll never forget the night she came over before I left. We sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, surrounded by half-packed duffel bags. She watched me carefully fold my clothes and finally asked, "Why are you really doing this?" Her tone wasn't mocking, just curious. I froze, hands gripping a t-shirt. I could have said something vague, like "I want a challenge" or "I need a change." But instead, the truth spilled out. "Because I'm tired of being the family failure," I whispered. "I'm tired of being invisible. I need to prove, maybe to them, maybe to me, that I'm not weak." Emily studied me for a long time before nodding. "Then you're going to do it. Because honestly, Kate, you've got more fire in you than you realize. They just don't see it." Emily studied me for a long time before nodding. "Then you're going to do it. Because honestly, Kate, you've got more fire in you than you realize. They just don't see it." Her words lit something in me. They weren't flowery or dramatic, but they were the first real vote of confidence I'd heard. And sometimes, all it takes is one person believing in you to make you start believing in yourself. Still, the closer boot camp came, the sharper the tension grew. Ryan joked louder. Dad grew quieter. Mom fluttered nervously. And me? I walked around with my jaw clenched, refusing to let them see how much it all got under my skin. The night before I left, Ryan barged into my room uninvited. He leaned on the doorframe, smirk plastered across his face, and said, "Well, this'll be fun. Can't wait to hear how long you last. Want me to start a pool at work? My money's on 48 hours. I stared at him, heart pounding, but forced myself to stay calm. "Laugh all you want," I said evenly, "but when I come back, you'll see." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Sure, Colonel Kate, whatever you say." That was the last thing he said to me before I left. And I carried that smirk with me like a stone in my pocket, heavy, irritating, impossible to forget. Because I knew the only way to silence it was to survive. The first thing they do at boot camp is strip you of your illusions. You arrive with whatever scraps of confidence you've built, and within hours, they grind it into dust. The bus ride there had been silent, a strange mix of fear and bravado hanging in the air. A few recruits joked nervously, trying to look tough, while others stared out the window like prisoners on the way to their sentence. I sat stiffly in my seat, hands clenched so tightly my nails dug half-moons into my palms. Every bump in the road made my stomach lurch. When we pulled up, the shouting began before the bus even stopped. Drill sergeants stormed in like a tidal wave of fury, barking orders, hurling insults, demanding we move, move, move. I stumbled down the aisle, heart hammering, as one of them screamed directly in my face, "What are you staring at, recruit? Do I look like a poster boy to you? Move your ass." That first day felt endless. Paperwork, uniforms, hair tied back tight, boots laced until my fingers cramped. Every second was a test: how fast you moved, how loud you responded, how well you followed, and if you faltered, if you hesitated even a breath, they pounced. By nightfall, I was drenched in sweat, my throat raw from shouting yes, sir, and no, ma'am. My legs trembled under me, and when I finally collapsed onto the hard bunk in the barracks, the thought hit me like a gut punch. Ryan was right. I'm not built for this. The second day was worse. We woke at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of metal trash cans being slammed against the floor. My body screamed with every movement, my muscles stiff and sore. We were herded outside in the dark, breath turning white in the cold air, and shoved into our first physical trial, a timed run with weighted packs. Halfway through, my vision blurred, my lungs burned like someone had lit a fire inside them, my legs felt like they were wading through cement. I tripped on a rock, hit the dirt, and for one awful second, I just stayed there. The drill sergeant was on me instantly. "What are you doing, recruit? Do you think this is nap time? Get up." But I couldn't. Not right away. My chest heaved, my arms shook, and shame flooded me as the other recruits thundered past. Maybe they were right, I thought bitterly. Maybe I don't belong here. And then, just as the thought threatened to root itself, Ryan's voice echoed in my head, "You'll last 2 days." 2 days. Was that it? Was that all I had in me? No, no, I couldn't let it end like this. Not with his smirk burned into my memory, not with Dad's silence still choking me. I dug my palms into the dirt, forced myself onto shaky legs, and started running again. Every step was agony, but I kept whispering to myself, "Not yet, not yet, not yet." That night, I cried silently into my pillow. My whole body ached. My bunkmate, this tall, athletic girl named Harper, rolled her eyes at me and muttered, "You're not gonna make it. I've seen your type before. You'll quit." Her words cut deeper than the sergeant's screams, because she wasn't wrong. I was the type who quit, at least, I used to be. But something inside me snapped again. I wiped my tears, turned toward her, and whispered hoarsely, "I'm not going anywhere." She snorted and rolled over, but I stayed awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, repeating those words to myself. Day 3 came, then day 4. Each day, I thought I'd reached my breaking point, only to find that somehow, some stubborn part of me dragged me 1 inch further. Still, it wasn't pretty. I was always at the back of the line during runs, always the last to finish push-ups, always the recruit whose uniform had some minor flaw. I was a target, easy prey for the instructors. And yet, I didn't quit. The first conflict of boot camp wasn't against the drills or the mud or the endless shouting. It was against myself, against the voice that said, "You're not enough. You've never been enough." And for the first time in my life, I started to fight back. Every blister became proof I was still standing. Every bruise was a badge of survival. Every insult hurled at me was fuel. Because I wasn't just battling boot camp. I was battling a lifetime of being underestimated. And losing wasn't an option anymore. By the second week, boot camp stopped feeling like a trial and started feeling like a war. Not just against the drills, the runs, the endless shouting, but against myself. Sleep deprivation gnawed at my brain. Hunger hollowed me out. My body was one constant ache. And every morning when the trash cans slammed or the whistles shrieked, the first thought that tore through me was, "I can't do this anymore." And yet, somehow, I'd swing my legs out of bed and do it again. But that didn't mean I wasn't cracking. One night, after another brutal day of obstacle courses, I found myself in the barracks bathroom, gripping the sink with trembling hands, staring at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent light. My face was pale, eyes red, hair plastered to my forehead with sweat. I barely recognized myself. "I can't keep this up," I whispered, though there was no one there to hear. Except, there was. Harper, the athletic girl who'd written me off from day 1, stepped out of one of the stalls. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a towel slung over her shoulder. "You said you weren't going anywhere," she said flatly. I stiffened, embarrassed she'd overheard me that first night. "Yeah, well, maybe I was wrong." She raised an eyebrow. "You lasted longer than I thought you would." It wasn't a compliment. Not really, but in this place, even indifference felt like recognition. I laughed bitterly and shook my head. "You sound like my brother. He gave me 48 hours. Did you prove him wrong?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I blinked at her in the mirror. "I guess I did." She shrugged, pushing off the wall. "Then prove yourself wrong too." She left without waiting for a reply, but her words lodged in my chest like a spark refusing to die out. The next day, during weapons training, I nearly lost it again. I couldn't get my grip right. My hands shook. The instructor barked at me so loudly the world seemed to narrow to just his voice and the sting of my own failure. Pathetic. Do you think the enemy will wait while you fumble around like a child? Heat rushed to my face. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, watching, judging, confirming what they'd suspected all along. I didn't belong here. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the weapon down and storm off the field. But instead, my teeth ground together, and I forced myself to try again. This time, my hands were steadier, my shoulders locked into place. The weapon snapped together just as the instructor leaned in to yell again. His mouth opened, then paused. A tiny flicker of something crossed his face. Not approval, not yet, but maybe less contempt. It was the smallest shift, but it felt like oxygen rushing back into my lungs. Later that night, Harper sat beside me in the mess hall, dropping her tray down without a word. She didn't tease me. She didn't roll her eyes. She just ate in silence, like I'd earned a seat at her table. That silent acknowledgement meant more than any praise. But the emotional roller coaster never stopped. For every small victory, there were a dozen failures. There were nights I bit my pillow to muffle my sobs, mornings where I wanted to feign an injury just to go home. I hated the mud, the cold, the bruises, the constant humiliation. But what I hated most was how my family's voices followed me everywhere. Ryan's mocking laugh, Dad's silence, Mom's pity. They weren't just memories, they were weights chained to my ankles. And yet, strangely, it was those same voices that kept me pushing forward. Every time I wanted to quit, I imagined Ryan smirking, saying "told you so." I imagined Dad barely looking up from his paper. I imagined Mom sighing, telling her friends, "Kate tried." But it wasn't realistic. And rage would flood through me. Rage at them. Rage at myself. Rage at the life I refused to settle for. I didn't want to survive boot camp just for me anymore. I wanted to walk into that kitchen, into that house, and see their faces when they realized they'd been wrong. One night, I confided this to Harper. We were sitting outside during a rare quiet moment, our boots dusty, our bodies exhausted. "I don't care if I break," I admitted, my voice low. "I just can't let them win. If I quit, they win." She studied me for a long time before saying, "Then don't quit." Simple as that. Easy for you to say. I muttered, "You're good at this. You belong here." She gave a sharp laugh. "You think I don't hear my dad's voice every time I mess up? You think you're the only one with demons?" That stunned me into silence. I'd been so wrapped up in my own pain, I hadn't considered others carried invisible weights too. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about me proving myself, it was about all of us. We were each fighting private wars, ghosts that couldn't be seen by the instructors or the other recruits. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. Something shifted in the third week. I didn't suddenly become strong or fast or fearless, but my body started to adapt. The endless drills didn't leave me gasping on the ground anymore. My legs still burned, my arms still ached, but I could push through the pain in a way I hadn't before. And people noticed. Not the instructors, they never gave compliments, but the other recruits. Harper stopped dismissing me. She even tossed me a quick "nice job" after I beat my personal best on the run. A couple of the guys started including me in their small talk, joking with me during downtime. It was subtle, but it mattered. For the first time, I wasn't just the girl everyone expected to quit. I was earning my place. But improvement came with new challenges. The instructors had a sixth sense for spotting weakness, and once they saw you weren't breaking, they turned up the pressure. One afternoon, we were put through a brutal endurance course, crawling under barbed wire, climbing walls, wading through freezing water. By the time I reached the last obstacle, a rope climb, I was shaking. The rope was thick, rough, dangling from a tall wooden beam. One by one, recruits scrambled up and slapped the top, sliding back down with triumphant grins. When it was my turn, a voice behind me muttered, "She's never gonna make it." I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Mason. He was the kind of guy who thrived in boot camp, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of recruit who acted like he'd been born with a rifle in his hand. From day one, he'd made it clear he thought I was dead weight. I ignored him, staring up at the rope. My palms were sweaty, my arms heavy, but I jumped, wrapped my legs tight, and began climbing. Halfway up, my grip slipped, panic shot through me, my stomach dropped as the rope burned against my hands. For a split second, I nearly let go. And then Mason's voice cut through again, dripping with contempt. "Knew it." That single word lit a fire in my chest. With a guttural yell I didn't know I had in me, I tightened my grip and hauled myself upward. My arms screamed, my legs shook, but I forced myself higher and higher until my hand finally slapped the beam. Sliding down, my hands raw and throbbing, I landed with a grunt. And though the instructors didn't react, I caught the flicker of surprise on Mason's face. He didn't smirk this time, he didn't say a word. That was better than any applause. But victories like that didn't mean the struggle was over. If anything, the pressure mounted. The more I improved, the more I feared slipping back into failure. One bad day, one mistake, and I worried I'd prove everyone right again. The turning point came during a night exercise. We were dropped in the woods with nothing but a compass and told to navigate back to base. The group split into pairs, and I got stuck with Mason. Great. The first hour was silent except for the crunch of boots on leaves. He walked fast, confident, barely glancing at the compass. I jogged to keep up, nerves gnawing at me. "You're holding it wrong," I muttered at one point, noticing his angle was off. He shot me a glare. "Don't tell me how to use a compass, princess." But 2 hours later, when we were clearly lost, I couldn't hold back. "You're leading us in circles." His jaw tightened. "Fine, you think you know better? Lead the way." So I did. My hands shook, my throat was dry, but I forced myself to focus. Step by step, reading the stars, the compass, the terrain, I pushed us forward. When we finally stumbled back into camp, we weren't first, but we weren't last either. The instructors didn't praise us. They never did. But Mason gave me a look, tight-lipped, reluctant, that almost resembled respect. Almost. That night, lying on my bunk, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was changing. The girl who once froze under pressure was now standing her ground. The one who always looked down at her shoes at family dinners was now staring down guys like Mason without flinching. It terrified me and thrilled me at the same time. Because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't just proving them wrong. Maybe I was proving myself right. They say boot camp is designed to break you. I thought that was just a figure of speech until the 7th week. It was raining the morning it happened. Not a soft drizzle, but sheets of water pounding the ground, turning the training field into a swamp. We'd been running drills since dawn, soaked to the bone, mud sucking at our boots. By the time they ordered us onto the obstacle course, my body felt like it had already been wrung dry. I was halfway through the course when my legs gave out. 1 second I was climbing the wall, the next I was flat on my back in the mud, gasping for air. The world blurred around the edges. My chest heaved, but no matter how hard I tried, my lungs refused to fill. "On your feet, recruit," the sergeant bellowed above the storm. I couldn't move. My muscles locked. My arms refused to push me up. For the first time since I'd arrived, I thought, this is it. I'm done. The shame hit me before the failure even did. I could see it so clearly. Ryan's smug grin, Dad's disappointed silence, Mom's soft, pitying sigh. Their voices overlapped in my head, so loud I thought I'd drown in them. "Knew you couldn't do it. You tried, Kate, but it wasn't realistic." You'll never be more than the family failure. I don't know how long I lay there. Seconds? Minutes? The rain pelted my face, cold and merciless. The sergeant's shouts blurred into the storm. And then, out of nowhere, a hand gripped my arm. "Get up," Harper hissed, crouched beside me, her uniform plastered with mud. "Don't you dare quit now." I can't," I stammered, chest tight, vision spinning. "Yes, you can," she snapped. "You're Kate, remember? The one who refuses to give them the satisfaction." Her words cut through the fog. They weren't gentle, they weren't kind, but they reminded me of the promise I'd made to myself, to her, to that girl crying silently into her pillow weeks ago. I forced air into my lungs, rolled onto my side, and somehow, shaking, aching, half-blind, I dragged myself upright. The sergeant was still screaming, but I barely heard him. My body moved on autopilot, one foot in front of the other. Stumbling through the rest of the course, I fell twice more, scraped my knees raw, nearly collapsed again, but I didn't stop. By the time I crossed the finish line, I was last, dead last. But I finished. That night, I broke. After lights out, I buried my face in my pillow and sobbed until my chest hurt. The barracks was silent except for the sound of rain still tapping against the windows. My hands shook as I pressed them over my mouth, trying to muffle the sound. I didn't want anyone to hear. But someone did. Harper's whisper cut through the dark. "You survived." I sniffled, rolling toward her bunk. "Barely. Barely counts," she said firmly. "You think strength means never falling? No, strength means getting back up. And you got back up." Her words sank deep, deeper than any insult ever had. For the first time, I realized maybe survival wasn't about being the fastest, the strongest, or the toughest. Maybe it was about refusing to stay down, no matter how many times you hit the ground. The next morning, my body felt like it had been smashed to pieces, but something inside me was lighter, clearer. The fear of failure hadn't gone away, the doubt hadn't vanished. But now I understood something vital. The only way they could win, the only way my brother's smirk, my father's silence, my mother's pity could define me, was if I quit. And quitting wasn't an option anymore. Not after everything I'd endured, not after Harper's hand in the mud, not after dragging myself through the storm, drenched, broken, and still standing. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The day after my collapse felt different, not because the pain was gone, but because I had stopped expecting it to leave. My body still screamed with every step. My shoulders ached from carrying gear. My knees were raw from the obstacle course, but instead of fighting the pain, I carried it with me like a badge. The sergeants didn't let up. If anything, they pushed harder. But something had shifted. I stopped measuring myself against the others. No more counting how many recruits passed me in sprints. No more obsessing over Ryan's words echoing in my skull. My only competition was the version of me that had almost quit in the mud. And slowly, people started to notice. One morning during weapons drill, I caught two of the guys, Martinez and Blake, watching me reload. Not with mockery this time, but with something else. Curiosity. Maybe even respect. I'd fumbled so badly with rifles the first week that Martinez had called me Butterfingers. Now, my hands moved with a calm, steady rhythm. Click, load, lock. Not fast, not flashy, but solid. "You've been practicing," Martinez muttered, almost grudgingly. I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes on the weapon, steady and focused. During the next endurance run, I stayed near the back as usual, but when Harper twisted her ankle on the third lap, instinct took over. "Lean on me," I ordered, looping her arm around my shoulder. Her face twisted in pain. "Kate, you'll fall behind." "Then we'll fall behind together," I snapped. For 2 miles, I bore half her weight, dragging us both forward. Every muscle screamed. My lungs burned, but I refused to let her stop. We crossed the finish line dead last, covered in sweat and dirt, but together. The sergeant's jaw tightened, like he wanted to reprimand us for our time, but even he didn't. He just barked, "Move," and turned away. That night, Harper whispered across the bunks, "You know you could have left me behind." I rolled my eyes. "And let you miss the finish line?" Not happening. She smiled then, soft, proud, and maybe a little grateful. It wasn't just Harper. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in the barracks. Recruits who'd once laughed at me started asking me small things: how I kept my boots dry, how I managed to remember drill commands, why I didn't crumble under the pressure anymore. I didn't even realize it was happening until Blake muttered during chow, "You know, people actually listen when you talk now." I blinked at him, fork halfway to my mouth. "They, what?" "Don't act so surprised," Harper teased. "You've got that thing, what do they call it? Presence." Presence. Me, Kate, the girl who'd been told she couldn't survive a single day of boot camp, the girl who had almost quit in the mud. The realization hit me hardest during a field exercise at dusk. We were split into squads, tasked with navigating through the forest, setting up camp, and standing watch. Our squad leader, Johnson, froze under pressure, fumbling the map, second-guessing every direction. I don't know what came over me, but my voice cut through before I could stop it. "Northwest," I said firmly, pointing. "That's the path. Look, the ridgeline matches the map. If we don't move now, we'll lose the light." Everyone turned. For a terrifying second, I thought I'd overstepped, but Johnson just nodded, relieved. "She's right, move out." And they did. No hesitation, no laughter, just movement. That night, sitting by the fire, I realized something. Leadership wasn't about being the loudest, strongest, or smartest. It was about being the one who refused to freeze when everyone else did, the one who spoke up when silence could cost us. I wasn't the best shot, I wasn't the fastest runner, but I was steady, unshakable, even when my heart pounded. For the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I was meant to be here after all. I thought about Ryan then, about the smirk he'd wear if he saw me now, not broken in the mud but standing taller, shoulders squared, carrying more than just my own weight. And for once, the thought didn't sting. It fueled me. Because the day would come when he'd see me not as the sister he mocked, but as something he'd never expected, a leader. And when that day came, I wanted to be ready. Graduation day at boot camp felt like a dream. Rows of us stood in formation, uniforms crisp, boots gleaming, the sun beating down hard enough to sting the back of my neck. When the commander called my name, my body moved like it had memorized every step. Forward, salute, receive the insignia, step back. Simple, yet my chest drummed with something I hadn't felt in years, pride that didn't need anyone else's approval. But the real test came afterward. My family was waiting. I spotted them at the edge of the crowd, Mom wringing her hands, Dad stiff as ever, and Ryan, leaning back with his arms crossed, smirk already in place. That smirk, the same one that used to crush me, felt almost laughable now. Still, my stomach twisted as I walked toward them. The closer I got, the more I could feel the old Kate creeping in, the one who always second-guessed, always shrank under their judgment. But Harper's voice echoed in my head, "Strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up." So I stood tall. "Kate," Mom breathed, pulling me into a hug. You look so different." I smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom." Dad nodded once, expression unreadable. "Congratulations." It was more than he'd given me in years, but it still felt like a formality, not pride. And then Ryan chuckled. Well, you actually survived boot camp. Didn't think you had it in you." The words were meant to sting, but they didn't. Not anymore. I turned my gaze on him, steady. "That's because you've only ever measured me by what you thought I couldn't do. Turns out, I don't live by your standards anymore." For the first time, his smirk faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, defensiveness creeping in. "It means," I said calmly, "that your opinion doesn't decide who I am. You called me weak, a joke, a failure, and yet here I stand, stronger than you ever imagined, stronger than you'll probably ever admit." The silence that followed was thick. Mom's eyes darted between us. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't flinch, not this time. Ryan scoffed, but it sounded forced. "Don't get cocky just because you made it through some training. Real life isn't a movie." I stepped closer, close enough for him to see the steel in my eyes. "You're right. It's not a movie, it's real life, and in real life, I didn't just survive, I proved you wrong. Every single day I didn't quit. Every time I stood back up when I wanted to collapse, I proved you wrong. That's my reality, and you can't take it from me. His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he didn't have a comeback. And God, that silence was sweeter than any applause. I felt taller than I'd ever felt in my life, not because of the uniform, not because of the insignia on my chest, but because, for the first time, I wasn't seeking his approval, or Dad's, or anyone's. I wasn't fighting for their belief anymore. I had built my own. Mom reached for my arm, eyes shining with tears. Kate. I'm so sorry if we ever made you feel like you weren't enough. Her voice cracked, and for a second the ache of old wounds tugged at me, but I breathed through it. Steady. You did, I admitted softly, but I'm not living in that anymore. I had to stop waiting for you all to see me, and start seeing myself, and now I do. Dad finally spoke, his voice low, almost reluctant. You've grown into someone we didn't expect. I met his eyes. That's because you never gave me the chance to show you, but I'm not asking for that chance anymore. I already took it. Ryan looked away, jaw tight, the smirk long gone, and in that moment, I realized the balance had shifted. The power he used to hold over me, the weight of his mockery, was gone. Not because he changed, but because I had. As we stood there in that awkward silence, sunlight blazing down on my shoulders, I felt something I'd chased my entire life but never caught. Freedom. Graduation wasn't the end, it was just the doorway to the real test. Weeks later, I was deployed into advanced training, leadership assessment, the crucible where recruits either broke or were forged into something more. It was designed to push us harder than anything before, sleepless nights, impossible missions, and responsibility that no one could hide from. The final exercise was a simulated combat operation in the wilderness. Our squad had to navigate miles of rough terrain, secure a mock base, and defend it until extraction. Failure meant starting over. Success meant recognition. And somehow, I had been assigned squad leader. When the sergeant read my name aloud, I thought it was a mistake. Me, the girl who had once collapsed in the mud? But his eyes were stone, and no one argued. That night, Harper squeezed my shoulder. You've been leading for weeks, Kate. They just made it official. Her faith steadied me more than I admitted. The mission began at dawn. The forest was wet, thick with mist, our gear heavy on our backs. My squad looked at me, not Johnson, not Martinez, not Harper, for direction. My heart pounded, but I forced my voice steady. Northridge first, I ordered, unfolding the map. We use the high ground for sightlines, then push west, quiet, controlled, stay sharp. And they followed. Hours passed. We trudged through mud, crouched low through brush, crawled across ridgelines. Every time doubt whispered, "You're not good enough." Ryan was right. "You'll fail them." I shoved it down with one simple truth: I'd already survived worse. When we reached the mock base, the attack hit. Simulated gunfire erupted, blanks echoing through the trees, smoke grenades rolling through the clearing. Panic rippled through the squad, recruits scrambling for cover. This was it, the moment I'd either rise or collapse. "Positions," I shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. Martinez, left flank. Harper, eyes high. Blake, cover fire. No. They moved, not perfectly, not seamlessly, but they listened. I crawled through mud to pull a recruit into cover, barked orders until my throat burned, and when the enemy pushed hard, I stood where everyone could see me, refusing to cower. My uniform was streaked with dirt, my hands scraped raw, but my voice never shook. Minutes felt like hours, but we held. When the final whistle blew, signaling the end, I realized I was still standing, chest heaving, squad intact, mock base secured. We had won. The commander himself walked into the clearing. His presence was like gravity. Every recruit straightened, every sergeant fell silent. He surveyed us, his gaze finally landing on me. "Squad leader," he said, his voice carried like steel. "Step forward." My boots squelched in the mud as I obeyed, heart hammering. He looked me over, slow, deliberate. then asked, "Do you know why you were chosen to lead this mission?" I swallowed hard. "No, sir. Because leadership isn't about being the strongest shot or the fastest runner. It's about resilience. It's about refusing to quit when quitting feels easier. You embodied that from the day you refused to stay down in the mud, and today, you proved it again." His words sank deep, anchoring into the very place Ryan's mockery used to live. For once, that old voice was silent. Then, before the entire company, he raised his hand in salute. To me. My throat tightened, vision blurring, but I snapped into position and returned the salute with steady precision. Around me, the recruits murmured, some nodding, some even smiling. Harper's grin shone brightest of all. And in that moment, it didn't matter that my family had doubted me, it didn't matter that Ryan had left, or that Dad had dismissed me, because here I stood, not as the girl they underestimated, but as the soldier I'd fought to become. When I look back now, it's almost hard to believe the girl I used to be, the one who cried into her pillow at night, terrified she'd never be enough, the one who flinched at every smirk from her brother, every disappointed silence from her father, every quiet sigh from her mother. That girl was real, she existed, and she hurt. But she didn't stay down. I think about that moment in the mud a lot, the day I collapsed. Rain pounding, lungs burning, every part of me screaming to quit. That was the closest I ever came to walking away. And if I'd given in to that voice telling me I wasn't strong enough, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't know what it feels like to stand in front of my commander as he saluted me. I wouldn't know the weight and the pride of carrying my squad across the finish line. I wouldn't know the strength of my own voice, steady and clear, even when I felt terrified inside. And maybe most importantly, I wouldn't know that leadership isn't about being the toughest in the room, it's about refusing to stay down when everything in you wants to. For a long time, I thought proving myself meant silencing my family's doubts. I dreamed of the day Ryan would choke on his own smirk, or Dad would finally say he was proud. But when those moments came, I realized something: their recognition wasn't the prize. The prize was realizing I never needed it in the first place. I built my own strength, I earned my own respect, I became someone I could be proud of, whether or not they ever saw it. The lesson? Sometimes, the people closest to you will be the loudest voices telling you that you can't, and it will hurt. It will cut deeper than any stranger's words ever could. But here's what I learned. You don't owe them your belief, you owe it to yourself. Every time I got back up, every time I finished last but finished anyway, every time I put one shaking foot in front of the other, I was teaching myself a truth my family never taught me. That I am stronger than I look. That I am capable of more than anyone expected. That my worth isn't defined by how quickly others recognize it. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this: don't let someone else's doubt become your truth. Because at the end of the day, the only opinion that decides your future is your own. I used to want revenge on Ryan, wanted him to feel small, mocked, powerless like I once did. But now, revenge doesn't matter. What matters is that his smirk doesn't have power over me anymore. That's the sweetest victory I could ever claim. I stand here now, uniform pressed, boots steady, eyes forward, not as the sister who was doubted, or the daughter who was dismissed, but as Kate. A soldier, a leader, a woman who refused to quit. And if I could go back and whisper one thing to that broken girl crying in her bunk, it would be this: don't quit. You'll be more than they ever believed. You'll be more than you ever believed. Because I am. And you can be too.